So these are your books of the Bible: first grade, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts. Okay, second grade, your memory scripture this week, 2 Timothy 1:7. 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. Awesome. That's your memory scripture for this week. Let's go over a couple of catechisms. What is the chief purpose of man?
The chief purpose of man is to love, glorify, and enjoy
What has
Him.
God given us to teach us how we should love, glorify, and enjoy Him? God has given us
the Word, the Old and New Testament, the only rule we should love, glorify, and enjoy Him.
Good. Okay, next one. What does the Bible primarily teach?
Bible teaches
What we are to believe about God.
to believe about God.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, let's go ahead and get into our lesson. Oh, somebody's mic. Let me see. I'm not sure where the sound is coming from. Okay, so we've been talking about Joseph, and so yesterday's lesson we discussed how he's in jail at this point, and he meets the baker and the butler who were servants in Pharaoh's palace, right? He meets the baker and the butler. He meets them, and one day they are troubled by some dreams that they had. And so they met the right person because Joseph, the Lord had given him the ability. Joseph knew that the Lord was the one who could help them interpret their dreams, meaning understand what their dreams mean. So both of them tell Joseph their dreams. The baker says that his dream, he had 3 baskets on his head, and on the inside of the top basket were some different bread rolls of bread, and then crows came and took the bread. And so unfortunately for the baker, that meant that in 3 days he would be executed. Then the butler tells Joseph his dream, and he says that he saw 3 vines with 3 bunches of grapes on the vine, and he took the grapes and he squeezed the juice from the grapes inside of Pharaoh's cup, and he gave Pharaoh his cup. So his dream had a great ending, right? That means in 3 days he would go back to serve in the palace, right? And so 3 days pass and everything goes exactly like how Joseph had told them it would go in the dream. Joseph, whenever he told the butler his dream, him and the butler made an agreement. He told the butler, he says, whenever you go back to Pharaoh's palace, could you tell him about me? I'm innocent. I was thrown in jail and I did nothing wrong. He says, could you please tell Pharaoh this? And the butler says, sure. So Joseph, whenever, 3 days pass, the butler goes back to the palace. A day passed, 2 days passed, and Joseph's like, okay, well, maybe you forgot. And then months pass, and then eventually a year passes by, and Joseph realized the butler had forgotten about him. He was not going to tell Pharaoh about him. And so after a year, and then 2 years pass, Joseph is still in prison. The butler had completely forgotten about him. The butler had completely forgotten about him. Okay, so after 2 years of being in jail, Joseph is in prison still, and the butler is still serving Pharaoh. Pharaoh one day wakes up from a dream that he had, and the dream that he had troubled him. The dream that he had kind of disturbed him, and so he called his wise men to help him with the dream. I told you often the kings would have wise men that would be around them to help them with things like that. So he had his wise men there with him, and he asked his wise men to help him understand his dreams, but they could not help him. They were like, we're not sure what the dreams mean. Then the butler, he thinks about it, and he's like, oh, wait, I know someone who could help you, Pharaoh. And he remembers Joseph 2 years later, but he finally remembers Joseph. And so he says, when I was in jail, he says there was a Hebrew man who helped me with my dreams. Maybe he could help you with your dreams. So Pharaoh calls for his guards to go and get Joseph out of prison so that Joseph could come to the palace to see if he could help Pharaoh out with his dream. Okay, and so that's where we'll pick up today in our lesson on Joseph going before Pharaoh in his palace. Okay. All right. So Joseph gets dressed. He gets ready because he's going before the king. So he arrives in the palace, in the throne room of Pharaoh. Joseph arrives there, and I'm sure he was nervous. Maybe he was like, what is going on? Why is he calling me to come before him? So Joseph is kind of like, maybe this is my chance to finally, right, get out of prison. Maybe this is finally my chance of a change. So they bring Joseph before him. And so the king, Pharaoh, tells Joseph, he says, I have had 2 dreams that worry me greatly. None of the wise men in Egypt could help me, but someone said that you could help me with my dreams. He says, I want to tell you the dreams, and I want you to tell me the meaning of them. And so Joseph said, listen, this wisdom does not belong to me, but it belongs to the Lord, because it was from the Lord. It was God that gave Joseph the wisdom that he had with being able to interpret or help people understand their dreams. He says, the God of heaven, the God whom I serve, will tell me what your dreams mean. And so Pharaoh's like, okay, then let your God tell me. Because see, Pharaoh in Egypt, they don't believe in the Lord. They don't believe in the real, true, and living God. In Egypt, they believe in a lot of false gods, meaning fake gods, gods that they made up. They worship animals a lot in Egypt, and they worship like the earth, things like that. So they didn't know the Lord like Joseph. They didn't know who when God, and Joseph said, my God, the God of heaven, the God who created everything, that's who's going to help me. And so Pharaoh was going to be able to see that the God that Joseph served was the real God. He was a living God, because all the wise men couldn't tell him anything. But this man, this Hebrew man, would be able to help him. So Pharaoh begins with his first dream. He says, in my first dream, I was standing by the Nile River, and I saw 7 fat and healthy cows come up out of the river. He says they were strong and healthy cows. He says, but then later I saw 7 very thin cows. They were thin, very skinny, unhealthy cows come up out of the river. Those 7 thin cows came out the river and ate the 7 fat and healthy cows. But after the thin cows ate the fat cows, they were thin just like before. So it was like they never ate anything. He says, and I woke up and I was like, whoa, what does that mean? He says, but then a little while later, I dreamed a dream similar to this dream. There were 7 ears of corn growing on a stalk, and they were healthy, they were full, they were good, full ears of corn. But then while I was looking, there was another corn of stalk that grew with 7 withered, dried, dead type of ears of corn. Y'all know what an ear of corn, right? Like corn on the cob, like that.
Yeah, I know that.
So you never heard of corn on the cob?
No, I have.
Okay, so the ears of corn, like a corn on a cob. You know how like if you have the whole full corn, not the corn that's off the cob, but the corn that's on it, that. So that came out. So he had 7 of them that were healthy, and then 7 of them that came that were thin. He says, so then those thin 7 ears of corn came and ate the 7 healthy ears of corn. And he was like, but once they ate it up, they still were like withered and dead. And then he woke up. And so he's like, could you help me, Joseph, understand what these dreams mean? It's the number 7. Something is healthy, something is unhealthy. I don't understand what these dreams mean. One dream was about cows, one was about the corn, ears of corn. He's like, I don't understand. So Joseph says, your dreams are indeed wonderful. And he says, and both of them have a meaning. And God is actually telling you what's about to happen and what he's going to do in the land of Egypt. So the Lord was actually giving Pharaoh like a future dream, something that was coming, a prophetic dream. He was giving him something that was to come in the future. So you see, so God gave him the dream, and it was because God knew Joseph was the only one who could help him with his dream. So you see, it's like Joseph, if he wasn't in prison in Egypt, he probably wouldn't have been able to help Pharaoh. So you see how we see that he's in the right place at the right time. And so, yes, he was in jail, but look where it led him to help Pharaoh out. And so he says those 7 fat cows and those 7 ears of corn, the healthy ears of corn, mean that there's going to be 7 years of plenty. meaning everything is going to grow in abundance in the land. We will have an overflow of everything. All the animals will have all kinds of babies. You have all the meat you want. We'll have all the crops that we want. Things will grow. There will be 7 years where there will be so much abundance. So many things are going to grow from the land. We won't be without anything. He says, but he says those 7 skinny cows and those 7 withered ears of corn also means something. That right after those 7 years of plenty where everything is growing, there's going to be 7 years of famine. And so we had talked about a famine when we went over Abraham, right? Remember, a famine is when there's a shortage of food. There's little to no food. He says, and right after those 7 years of plenty, there will be 7 years of famine that comes next, meaning things won't grow. It's going to be the worst famine that has ever hit the land of Egypt. You won't find food anywhere. So the Lord was giving Pharaoh this dream so that he could prepare for what was to come. There will be 7 years of good, 7 years of plenty. But then right after that, there will be 7 years of famine. Everything, nothing will grow. There would be barely any food for the people. So Pharaoh listened and he was like, yeah, that sounds about right, Joseph. That sounds exactly like what my dreams could be about. So Pharaoh says, okay, so what do you think I should do? And so Joseph said, well, he says, so that you could be prepared, because the Lord is obviously giving you this dream so that you could prepare for this, right? And so he says, my suggestion, Pharaoh, is that you should pick a wise man, the wisest man in Egypt, to be in charge of all the food. So during the 7 years of plenty, there will be storehouses. You can build storehouses, and a storehouse is where they will store food, right? Kind of like how you have a pantry in your house where you store all your cans and stuff, where all your, canned goods or whatever. He says, you need someone to have a storehouse, to be in charge of storehouses. And while there's 7 years of plenty, have that person save a portion of the food, right? Save some of, don't eat all the food just because it's growing. No, save some of the food in the storehouses so that when the 7 years of famine come, we'll have food in Egypt, right? We won't be like, oh man, we ate all our food. No, we're going to have food stored and prepared for when that famine comes. He says they're going to save up the grain every year all over, and to make sure that the people have enough of food when the famine comes. And that's actually a smart idea, right? Not to just eat all the food during the years of plenty, because it's there, but instead during those years of plenty, actually saving some of it, maybe like half of it, saving it. We'll eat, of course, we'll enjoy and eat some of it, but some of it we'll save, because right after those 7 years, what's coming? The famine. And we want to be ready for that. So Pharaoh's like, I like that plan. He says, I love that plan, actually, Joseph. And he said, honestly, there's no better man to be the one in charge but you. He says, there's no one else, Joseph. He says, you help me with my dreams. You help me understand my dreams. So obviously there's wisdom on the inside of you, Joseph. So there's no one else that I should select to be in charge of this job, this big job. And so Pharaoh said, Joseph, I will select you to be the one who will take care of this. And so Joseph, who was a prisoner at the time, was now going to be promoted. The Lord was finally going to raise Joseph up to a place of position. All the low places that Joseph has been in, being thrown in the pit, being sold, being a slave, being thrown in prison. Look where he is now, standing before the king. And so not only was he put in charge, but Pharaoh said, Joseph, I'm going to make you second in command in all of Egypt. Meaning, we know King Pharaoh is the first in command, right? All the people obey King Pharaoh, but Joseph was right under the king. He was right next to the king in power. So Joseph went from being a prisoner to second in command in the land of Egypt. So he paid not only that, but then he gave Joseph the fancy robes. The Egyptians were known for wearing like fancy clothing. So he put on him the fancy robes, and Pharaoh gave Joseph a ring that meant he had authority and power. And so anytime Joseph walked in anywhere, if he walked through the city, if he walked through a village, anything, the people had to bow down before Joseph and to show honor and respect to him because of his authority. So do we see his dreams coming to pass. Yes. The dream that God had given him years before about how, his brothers were bowing, the sun, the moon, and stars were bowing to him. We see how here it is right here. Now, not fully because it's not his actual brothers, but we see how the people, when they see Joseph, how the position that he's in right now, people have to bow down to him. And it's not to worship him, but it's bow down in respect to who he is. So Joseph, who went through all of what he went through, look at where God has placed him now. And that's why I said everything that he went through was for this moment. If Joseph would have never been sold by his brothers and brought to Egypt, he would have never been able to have Pharaoh, right? And none of that would have happened for him. But we see how, yes, he was sold, and yes, it was terrible. But all of that bad that happened to him, God turned that all around and blessed Joseph to be second in command in Egypt. He's now one of the highest authorities in Egypt. Not only that, but Pharaoh gave Joseph a lovely home, a palace to live in, a mansion. Now Joseph has a nice home, and he gave him a wife. And Joseph was famous throughout all the land of Egypt. Everyone knew who Joseph was. Not just that, but they honored Joseph because of how he helped Egypt prepare for this coming famine. So day after day, during those 7 years of plenty, Joseph worked. He made sure that they were storing just the right amount of food because he knew that the famine was coming. So he worked. He gathered all the food. He made sure that everything was going the way that he told Pharaoh it should go. And Joseph did that. During these 7 years of plenty, the Lord blessed Joseph and his wife with 2 sons. He had one son named Manasseh, which meant forgetting, because he said how much the Lord blessed him made him forget about all the bad he went through. He says, all of the blessings that I have right now makes me forget about all of the trouble that I went through with my brothers, how Potiphar's wife lied on him, all of that. He said, the Lord has raised me up, and so he has made me forget all of what I went through. He also had another son named Ephraim, which meant fruitful, because God blessed him to be fruitful. Joseph has, a lot now. He's rich now. He's wealthy now. And so he's like, Lord, all of that I went through was worth it. And so he named his sons, part of what he went through. Okay. So at last, the 7 years of plenty ended, the years where they had everything, right? But they're ready for the famine, right? Because they stored all the food. So the famine comes, and just like Joseph said, it was a really bad famine. The famine not only hit the land of Egypt, but it hit all the places around Egypt, meaning the land of Canaan. Now, who's in the land of Canaan? His brothers, his father, his family. They're all still in the promised land, the land of Canaan. So they also were affected by this bad famine as well. Okay? And so people started to come from all over, not only in Egypt, but all the surrounding cities. And they came to Egypt because there was word that Egypt had food. So they were like, let's go to Egypt to get food. And so Joseph, he opened the storehouses for not only the people in Egypt, but also the other people to come and get food, but they had to pay for it, right? So that's a good thing for Egypt, because not only do they have food, they're the only ones that have food, but they can also get money for it, right? Yeah, so that's a good thing for the people in Egypt. So Joseph is in charge of all of this. He came up with all of this, well, the Lord gave it to him. Yes, so he had this plan, and so everything is going well, right? So let's go back to the land of Canaan, where Joseph's 10 brothers are. Well, 11 brothers, I'm sorry, because Benjamin, but his 10 older brothers. He has his younger brother, Benjamin. His father is also there as well. Remember, his mother, Rachel, had died. She had died already. And so all Joseph's family is in the land of Canaan. So like I just said, the famine hits the land of Canaan as well. So back in Canaan, Jacob, he's still alive. He's pretty old at this time, right? Jacob is still there. And so he calls his sons to him. He says, listen, we're out of food. We don't have any more food. We need something to eat. He says, I hear there is food in Egypt. So I need you, sons, his 10 older sons, to go down to Egypt to get food. Now, they don't know that who's in charge of the food? Joseph. They don't know this. They think Joseph is maybe dead or something. They don't know. So Jacob is telling the sons, I need you to go down to Egypt to go and get food because we need food as well. So the brothers, they're, they listen to their father. They're a lot older now too. They're not just like Joseph grew up, they're older as well. And so they, get all their stuff. They pack up, their sacks with money, with coins, stuff that they had so that they could bring it to Egypt so that they could purchase food. So the brothers are on their way to get food from Egypt. So they travel, going all the way to Egypt so that they could get food. So when they arrive in Egypt, they ask, where do we get food from? And they were like, you get it from over here. So they go to the storehouse, his brothers, they go to the storehouse and they go before this Egyptian man. Now, again, the Egyptians dressed differently from the Hebrews. The Egyptians dressed a lot more fancier than the Hebrews. So whenever you saw someone dressed that certain way, you knew that they were an Egyptian because they dressed a particular way. So when they see the Egyptian ruler, they just automatically assume the man is an Egyptian. They don't know that this man is Joseph, their brother. They don't know that. And not just that, they hadn't seen him since he was a young man. So he grew up. He looks different, and plus Joseph had learned the Egyptian language as well. So Joseph is speaking Egyptian as well. So they just think, oh, this is just another Egyptian man. They're not realizing, no, this is your brother Joseph who y'all sold. This is him now. So they go before the ruler, the man who was in charge of the storehouses, and they see him and they, they bow before him. Look at that. Now we see the dream fully come to pass, right? Because in the dream with the bundles of wheat, their bundles of wheat bowed to Joseph. And look at that. When they go before the Egyptian ruler, who they don't know is Joseph, they have to bow down in respect. So we see how the Lord gave Joseph those dreams and how it has come to pass. And so that means the Lord, when he tells you something, it's going to happen. It might take a while sometimes. It does. Trust me, I know. But the Lord will always come through. And we see how he gave Joseph those dreams, and it's happening right now. So they were bowing down before this Egyptian man, not knowing it was Joseph. But Joseph, when he saw them, he knew that was his brothers. He knew. He said, those are my brothers. But he didn't say anything to them. He didn't reveal to them who he was because he realized they didn't recognize him. So he was like, okay, I'm not going to say anything to them. So he didn't want them to know, though, that it was him. He wanted to see really and truly if their hearts had changed. Because the last time Joseph saw his brothers, what were they doing to him? Selling him. They were selling him, right? And so he's like, okay, I'm not going to tell them it's me because I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to react. So I'm just going to pretend that I don't know them, just like they don't know me. And so Joseph began, he didn't even speak in Hebrew to them. He spoke in Egyptian because they spoke Hebrew. The Egyptians spoke Egyptian. So he's like, I'm not going to tell them. So now Joseph has a choice right here, right? He can choose because he has all power right now, right? He could do a lot to his brothers because of what they've done to him. So Joseph can choose to say, I'm going to treat them how they treated me, right? He could do that. He could. Or he could say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and forgive them. I'm going to go ahead and forgive what they've done to me and just move past it. And so tomorrow's lesson, we'll get into what Joseph will do and what decision he will make when it comes to his brothers. And whenever he will finally tell them who he is, what he would do. Okay? So that's where we'll stop today. So Joseph has met his brothers again years later. It's been years have passed by now. Maybe almost like 20 years have passed since he last saw them. And now they're here before him. They don't know it's him, but he knows it's them. Okay? Amen? Amen. Awesome. So tomorrow's lesson, we'll get into all that him and his brothers will go back and forth with when it comes to before he reveals who he is. Okay? All right. So that's our lesson on today. Joseph is now second in command in Egypt. Joseph, who was a prisoner, is now second in command. So we see how the Lord raised him up to this position of power and authority. Okay, awesome. All right, so that is it for our Bible lesson on today. Great job. So before we go, well, no, I'll talk about this on your Zooms later. Okay, so that is it for us today. Thank you for joining us for Bible. First grade, I'll see you shortly. Second grade, I'll see you later today, okay?
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.